Okay. Again, record all these for putting on YouTube. If you don't want to be seen, now's your chance to block yourself out. I'm going to put everybody on mute here. 1 second, if I can find the right button for that. Mute all. Basically, for folks that are new to this, I'm going to go give the presentation. If you have questions, if you put them in the chat, I won't see them until we get to the end. If there's anything that's absolutely dire, please put them in the box. Carol, my faithful wife and assistant down the hall, will come running down here and tell me I've done something really stupid, and I'll try to fix it. Otherwise, we'll look at the questions and try to go through it later on down the line. So appreciate joining. Again, this is going to be a deep dive into the transportation area at the 64-65 World's Fair. And let me get started with that. So let's see, here we go. Okay, this is the map of the transportation area. It's over on the western side of the fair site. One of the most popular areas of the fair. Some of this is going to be old hat to people that have been on these talks before. I know I have a few people that are here for the first time, but the 64 World's Fair was not as much of a World's Fair with a lot of international participation as others, because Robert Moses, who Frank was just chatting about, had gone out of his way, it seemed, to annoy the international community, particularly the Bureau of International Expositions. And a lot of the international countries did not participate because the BIE declared this was a non-official fair. And if they participated in the 64 fair, they'd never get a World's Fair of their own. So Moses turned to American industry, asking them to step up and fill in the space. And the transportation area is one of the most successful spots where they did that. You have Ford up at the top, General Motors down at the bottom, Chrysler in the middle, and others. We're going to get to each of these particular exhibits, but it was a extremely popular part of the fairground. Very well attended, unlike the lake amusement area that we did last week, where people would run through it from the parking lot to get to a pavilion. At the transportation pavilion area, people could come and would come and stay the entire day. So we're going to take a virtual walk through the property. We're going to enter up at the top left-hand corner, the Peter Stuyvesant Gate. And this is the sort of view you'd get as you come along. Over to the right, you have the United States Space Park. You have a bunch of colorful flags. You have the flag right here on the far right of the fair itself. The other flags were just fanciful colors and patterns. It didn't make any particular sense. It was just to give it a sense of vitality to the area. And again, Space Park, very tantalizing, just off to the side. In the background, the massive Ford Pavilion. Once you get through the gate, the first thing you would come to would be Eastern Airlines. They had a very neat deal going for them. If you were staying at a hotel and you were getting a flight out that night, you could come to the fair, check in with your luggage, go into Eastern Airlines, as long as you're flying Eastern, of course. You could check your suitcase, go have a nice day at the fair, and when you got to the airport, there was your suitcase checked in for you at the flight. They also had the ability to make reservations for you, get you, rebook it. You decided you like the fair so much you want to stay another day, do it. And it was one of the first computerized ticketing systems that was available at the time. And they were a big display on how you could come into Eastern and book future reservations, and even amazingly back then, book your seat assignments, things you kind of take for granted today. Further down the line, you have the Century Grill in the background. This is kind of an interesting situation where you had some very great architecture at the fair, and then you had other very industrial type buildings. So you had the Century Grill in 1964, and in 65 it came back as Steaktown, USA. And you have to say at some of these points, the signage and everything here, this is just not, from my particular view, highly appealing. What was interesting is my friend Bill Young, who he and I have done the 3 books on the 64 fair. He did a thing on how Steaktown, USA was actually designed by an amazing architect, wrote up this whole thing on it, how the steel beams were reused to rebuild parts of Lincoln Center, all this other stuff. And it was, people missed the fact it was published on April Fool's Day. But he went out of his way to point out the architectural wonders of Steaktown, USA. Looking over at the Ford exhibit, this is early in the 64 season. You have a massive construction zone down below the Hall of Science, which got started way, way late and was not open until near the end of the 64 season. But we've just come in on the bottom left corner, the Stuyvesant Gate. You can see one of the entrance pylons that we just discussed. Eastern Airlines just above that. If you continue walking up, you have the fountain. Over to the left was the steak restaurant, and then Ford, massive building, Ford. If you look at the lines for this, you've got people lined up on the left side to go in. At times, you'll see that they went all the way down the entire length of the building. What most people don't realize is there was also a line on the right side, which was equally long. This was an extremely popular exhibit, and Ford had high hopes for it and delivered very, very well. Ford had been at the 1939 World's Fair. They had, matter of fact, been at the 33, 34, actually only at the 34 season of the Chicago World's Fair. And they had come up with the idea for each of these shows where they would have people riding in a Ford to experience how smooth the ride were. At the 39-40 fair, how nice air conditioning was, a new invention. So they decided that they had to have something where you rode through it in cars for the 64 fair. Talked about a bunch of this in my talk about Disney and World's Fair, so I'm not going to go into the whole situation, but Ford had fired their first 6 designers. They had no pavilion. They didn't know what they were going to do. Walt approached General Motors trying to get a contract with them. GM turned him down, sent him to Ford. Ford said, yeah, we'd be interested. What do you have in mind? And Disney came up with a ride where you'd be riding in Ford cars through the great wonders of the world. That was great, except the budget was exorbitant. Ford said, we just can't afford it. So they decided to go with something else where you would take a ride in time and see the dinosaurs. So it was a great pavilion. I think these arches were 120 feet tall or so on the Ford Rotunda. On each of the Ford pavilions, they had the Wonder Rotunda, and they came back with that exhibit or that design concept here, where this particular part of it had their cars on display. You had these glass tunnels, which were wonderful because the cars were in full visibility, everybody waiting on line down below. And then they had periodic changing displays of hot new Ford cars and products right out front under the Ford logo. So they would put things like the new Mustang. The Mustang was debuted at the fair, became a huge hit. This particular one is a particular appeal to me because one of my friend's sisters' friend had a car identical to this. They would drop down the top, cram me, my brother Jim, my friend Mike in the back seat, and we'd go off for a day at the fair. In heaven, you go into the fair for free in a back seat of a Ford Mustang. Life was very, very good. Long, long lines. We joke online in some of the forums about all the nuns that were at the World's Fair. We see some of them here. I don't think they probably bought too many Fords themselves, but they were coming in to see the show, and these lines could stretch for hours. The lines were something interesting that Walt learned. This is a shot of the Ford Pavilion at the 62 Seattle World's Fair up on the upper left side, and you can see a very long line of people waiting to get in. Nothing whatsoever to entertain them. They just stood out in the sun, happily not super hot most days in Seattle, but there was nothing to really keep them entertained while they were waiting to see the show itself. So they came up with an idea for Ford that they would put the International Village as a waiting area as you wound your way through it when you got into the pavilion. Ford's overseas operations were basically screaming that Ford had diverted the vast majority, almost all of the advertising budget for several years to go and support the fair. And what was that going to do for the other Ford products that were being sold overseas? So Ford said, okay, we understand that. And they put some of the sample cars from each of the other divisions on display here. But they also put the International Village in so that people could come and see where Ford products were being sold. If you were, say, from Austria, you would get a kick out of seeing an Austrian village. If you were from Italy, same sort of thing. And it was also something for the Americans just to look at and get some fun out of. This was another product of Disney's Imagineering division. Well, they did a lot of intricate details in these buildings, very well designed. Again, places you might not think about Fords being sold on islands in the Pacific. places over in Italy. This one I got a kick out of. If you look at this one real closely, there's 4 guys in identical jackets with identical long hair posing for pictures. They stuck the Beatles into the exhibit, and there's these 2 gals that came down to get their pictures taken with the Beatles, and one of the Beatles is taking everybody's group shot. So nice little thing for if you have a good lens camera, which you can pick up some of the little details. You got further into it, now you start getting to the real product, the Ford cars. This was a replica of a quadricycle, Henry Ford's first car. In the background, you have some of the more modern cars, and behind it, you have this intricate carved wall of transportation motifs. This was designed by Disney. I think it was John Hench had come up with the concept for it. It was originally a multicolored design. Ford executives objected that it took too much eye interest off the cars, so they had to go with this kind of terracotta bland design, but it was very, very nicely executed piece. And again, this gives you an idea of what you would see when you're waiting inside. That area is blurred. It's blurred because it was in motion at the time. It was all the Ford logos from all the different divisions that they had around the world. You had the International Village in the front, the latest cars on display, and the ramp is now going to take you upstairs to where the real show itself was. They would, again, rotate the cars in and out. I'd like to know exactly how they got some of these cars in and out of there. They must have had a pretty good sized forklift or something that went through the fountain area. But it was a popular thing to come and see all the cars. Again, we're going up the ramp now to see the show, but looking back down to some of the waiting area. The ramps, if you were a fan of the old TV show, The Time Tunnel, you might get a kick out of it because it looks like you're taking a trip through there. Off to the side of the ramps were product displays about Ford's quality control, some of the futuristic design cars, things to keep you entertained as you went up the ramp. When you got up to the top, there was another couple of Ford cars on display up there, and then right behind them was the Auto Parts Harmonic Orchestra. This was a creation of Raleigh Crump, Disney Imagineer, who had also done the Tower of the Four Winds at Pepsi. If you look closely at all these particular musical instruments, they're actually car parts. So muffler parts, if you see the lecterns where the music would be placed, they have windshield wipers that would go back and forth in time to keep time. So everything here was done by car parts. After the fair ended, this was sent to the Hemisphere 68 in San Antonio, repainted in brighter, more garish colors, but resurfaced there. And it's kind of neat to see. Again, it had pre-recorded music. The instruments moved and keys would flutter on them back and forth. A kind of fun thing that Rolly came up with. Then you got to the real heart of the thing, the ride. You get to get in a brand new Ford convertible. There's very few convertibles on the market today, but back then, most of the major cars had a convertible option to them. And you would get on and go off for a trip on the Disney show. Mentioned this on prior shows. This picture is kind of interesting in several ways. One is right at the bottom, you can see a wheel sticking out of the floor. That's how the cars got moved. They took the engines out of them, they took the transmissions out of them, they didn't need them, and they didn't want the weight of them. But the cars were driven by a metal plate on the bottom of the car that would come in contact with the spinning wheel that would then push it down to the next set of spinning wheels. You had a special set of rods that were welded to the car to steer it. You can see the pin sticking into the floor that goes up to the car that would take it around turns. This is easy to date as an early picture of the fair because it has a license plate on it. The concept was to have license plates from all the states. And you can see here, this particular one, South Carolina in 1964. But the problem they found was people were waiting online. They're from Delaware and they see a Delaware car coming down the line, or they don't even see it. They just want to wait for it. And I want to wait for my car from Wisconsin, or I want to wait for my car from Rhode Island. So very quickly, they just took off the license plates and made people just get in the first car that came along. People then, of course, wanted to get in the Mustang because that was the hot thing. And they finally just had to say, you get in the next car, we can't accommodate you for your particular desire. You also notice looking at these cars, no rear view mirrors, no side view mirrors, because they didn't want to block the view. They also didn't want people getting their garments caught on the side view mirrors. Over in the background is the control panel. There's one of these for each of the two sides of the track. They could operate one track at a time. Was designed that they could go with just half the ride at a time if capacity was low. Turned out that was never a issue, that it was always so busy they were always running both sides. But that was one of the Disney control panels. They could monitor people going through the attraction. And again, more people lined up, happy families sitting there. Very many of the pictures you see like this one, the kid is getting the drive and the parents are taking the trip. Some people decided to sit in the back seat and just be chauffeur driven by the robotic driving cars. And we're going to the glass tunnel now, the Magic Skyway. And this was, again, a great concept that people down below could see all these cars. The tunnels were air conditioned, so it was nice and pleasant to be inside when you were taking the ride. On the back of this Mustang, you can see that they put a bigger bumper on it. That chrome bumper was not normally on the Mustangs. They've had to put it on a few of the cars because despite their best efforts, at times the cars would get away from each other and a heavier car would catch up to a lighter car going downhill, bang into it and do damage. So after they had taken out quite a few taillights, and they did have an on-site repair shop we'll see in a few moments, they had to put these special bumpers on some of the cars. They also had to put guards in the tunnels because people, being what they are, they'd have the propensity, hey, this would be fun to jump out and go running around through here. So later on, they ended up putting electric eyes and pressure mats and that sort of thing. But his job was to make sure you didn't take a self-guided tour. Again, seeing outside cars going through the tunnel. And this was what you got when you went inside. You had two sets of tracks, one slightly higher on the left than the one on the right, which was great for sightline views. And you got in to go see the world of the dinosaurs, the world of the cavemen. It was a very well done show by Disney. Some of these are the dinosaurs that exist today at Disneyland. After the fair ended, they brought back the dinosaurs. They did not bring back the cavemen. And now you can see these as you're going along the train track at Disneyland. You see the Grand Canyon, Diorama, and Primeval World. So you had all these dinosaurs, happy dinosaurs feeding each other. You had a bunch of pterodactyls yelling and screaming. Happy Brontosaurus family, or Triceratops there. This one I get a kick out of because these dinosaurs came back to Disneyland from their battle. They had been fighting there for years at New York and continue their fight. My office at Disneyland was actually right behind these guys. And at night, when it was quiet and most people weren't around, you'd be sitting there trying to get some work done, and you'd be listening to the pterodactyls and the dinosaurs roaring all night. So most people, you get distracted at work because of your coworkers. At Disney, I'd get distracted at work because of the dinosaur battle behind me. It was also kind of neat working at Disney because I could then, when the park was closed, I could walk out right up to the dinosaurs and take myself back to the days of the fair. You also had the cavemen. They did not come back out to Disneyland. They didn't have the space for it. But they had quite a exhibit of these figures. They did bring the figures back out to California and repurpose them for other audio animatronic shows. I could not tell you where exactly they went, but there's a really good chance that the cavemen you're looking at here today are now part of the Pirates or some of the other shows. And again, they're out there slaying a mastodon, bringing it back so they can have a barbecue. The narration here is telling you how they started inventing the common language, where the guy on the right is yelling something like ook, 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 and that means, hey, there's a bear behind you going to eat you. More of the mastodon. I just threw a bunch of the cavemen in because for the Disney folks, this is stuff that we don't have anymore. The inventor of the wheel, taking fire to warm yourself up. Disney in their narration today talks about the when this show is back done in '64, the first used car salesman, and you can see his wife off to the left is not very happy at all that she gets to haul his butt around as he's pontificating on why people should buy one of his carts. And they also talked about how the cavemen were now starting to communicate through primitive drawings and taking us into the world of the future. The future is not so great. They basically ran out of money and they had no idea what the future was going to be. It's a traditional issue for any theme park trying to predict the future, that by the time you build it, it's obsolete. So the future was these plexiglass shapes with some day glow paint on them, things running around on monofilament line to give some sense of movement. And that was Disney and Ford's look at the future. You came out of it into the reason why, of course, Ford wanted you there in the first place. You came out and there was every Ford car you could possibly think of on display. And for many of these, you could actually walk up and get into and sit down and try out the seat and see how you felt on it. Others were concept cars. The Aurora station wagon here, it had the idea that the front seat for the passenger at least would revolve. So you could turn around. You can actually see through the open door there a full bar. So you could entertain. I'm sure the driver was not supposed to partake, but they had all these different cars you could take a look at. Some of them, again, concept cars, some of them were ones that were available for purchase if you were so inclined. You also had Jimmy Clark's Lotus Racer. He had just won the Indianapolis 500 in this car, so it was a big piece of automotive modern history, but something of great interest to people that were car enthusiasts. You could go over to the Philco side of the pavilion. People today don't think so much about Philco anymore, but at that time they made quite a few products besides car parts. They also made things like washers, dryers, TV sets, refrigerators, all sorts of odds and ends. So you could come through and see all the various Philco products. That was a TV console. When you came outside, there was this booth outside, and it had, oh, I got a picture out of order. So remember the booth, where are you from? And we're going back, I had slugged these in here. This is another Philco exhibit of a kitchen of the future. Talk about a patriotic theme, huh? I mean, this one would wake up your eyes every time you came down in the morning for your breakfast. You have a Princess telephone, very brand new, off to the side, very modern. But everything being done with plexiglass and Formica and real modern stuff for the kitchen of the future. So again, we're back to that booth outside. Everybody could come and get a Ford souvenir. It's yours for the asking. You would go up, they'd ask what state you were from, push a little button to keep count so they had an idea where their marketing was being potentially effective, and you would be able to get one of these badges. And they had them for all 50 states. They had them for some European territories, overseas territories, and they glowed in the dark. And if you have them today, they still glow in the dark. So a great bit of memory for the Ford Pavilion. They also had other things on display. You could go and see the latest Ford tractors. We'll see this little tyke with his hat a couple times during the day. He showed up in a number of pictures, and he was just having a ball wherever he was. They had earth movers. They had all sorts of various odds and ends outside. They also had something that was kind of new for 1964, was the idea of campers. So in this particular one, it's a camper that goes into a pickup truck shell. There's others that they had for pop-up campers. This is at the end of the 65 season. They were telling you, come on in, we have the 66s on display. But here's the pop-up camper. Again, back up to this point in time, people didn't do a lot of camping with this sort of thing. So they were trying to promote the fact that you could go and buy these from Ford, go off and hit the road and take your time. Mentioned they had a maintenance facility on board that the cars, when you got off of them, went into this area. They did a very quick cleanup of the cars, but they had an entire maintenance facility in here where they could go and repair things that had gotten damaged. One of the problems they had, people would do things like peel the Mustang emblems off the cars, pop them off the dashboards, do all sorts of things. They had boxes of them that they could glue them back into place. If a car got severely damaged because people had managed to rip a seat or something, they could take it offline, put it back together. And Ford has very detailed records of exactly how many radio buttons they had to replace, how many horn rings had to be redone. So this was a very intricate part of the operation. We come outside, mention the Hall of Science. It was under construction, as we see here. It had been almost not built. There was tremendous funding battles for the city of New York, how much this was going to cost, how it was going to be funded, what was going to be in it, when it was going to be held after the fair. But Robert Moses really, really wanted this in the park as a long-term permanent facility. So he fought to keep it on the books. Other projects that tried to start this late were killed, like the World of Food. This one he allowed to continue. They got to the point where they built the basement part of it, and they had exhibits open in the base while the construction continued on the main building overhead. But it's a beautiful building, still in the park today. This undulating walls of concrete with blue glass set inside. If this is a view from inside, again, of how the thing is constructed. So all sorts of different pieces of glass, different sizes, shapes in there. And when you're in the Great Hall, as it's called, and the light is coming from the outside, it's a very nice experience. People liken it to a cathedral type experience. Up above, you had a show done by Martin Marietta. You had a space theme to it. Danny Thomas did narration for a film. But basically, this lifting body goes up into space, docks with the white piece of equipment there, which was very much like the Agena boosters that were being used for, or proposed being used at that time for the Gemini missions. So this hung up there, was all on rails, operated, moved back and forth in synchronization of the movie. I believe after the fair ended, this was there for a number of years, finally taken out, and I believe, but I have not seen in person, that they're at the museum out in Long Island, the Airplane Museum in East Meadow. I don't think they're on display, but I think they're in their possession. Down in the basement, they had all sorts of exhibits. You had the Atomic Energy Commission here. Of course, we were going to have reactors in every town powering everything we did. So start getting kids used to why you're using mechanical hands to handle radioactive material. Here, they would show you get on these bicycles, pedal like mad. They had a little thing there to show you how hard you'd have to work to just generate the same amount of electricity that 1 pound of uranium could have produced just by sitting there idle. Again, selling everybody that uranium and plutonium and all these things were great things to have. And other displays of medical products down below. It's explaining to people what a pap smear was, something new, getting people used to it. The radioactive dime, you could come up, give them your own dime. They would stick it in one of these plastic holders for you, irradiate it. I always get a kick. People write to me, "Oh, I found this irradiated dime, in my house," and "Oh my God, get rid of it right now." It turned out to have a half-life of about 37 seconds or something, so there's no discernible radiation from these at all. But it was a very big thing to get. 64 being the last year of silver coins. These things, a lot of the 64 ones don't exist anymore because people just pop them out to sell them for money. But a real popular souvenir of going to the fair. Next to the Hall of Science is the United States Space Park, an absolutely brilliant piece of exhibit by NASA. As you can see here, it's done by NASA, and it was also done by the Department of Defense, because a lot of the rockets that NASA was using at the time had originally been developed as intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they were happening to stick men on top of. So they came through and exhibited these. This is a kind of a overall idea of what we're looking at. It was a wide open outdoor area, lots of exhibits on display, full-size rockets. Some of these were actual real rockets taken off the production line, moved here. So they might have internal stiffeners inside because some of the fuel tanks and everything weren't there. Most of them were actual real pieces of hardware, the rockets. Down below, when you get into the space capsules, that they were replicas. But it was this was a big thing in 64 and 65. All the fascination of the Mercury 7 astronauts, the Gemini program kicking off, Apollo coming along line. For a hardware geek like myself, this was just heaven sent. You could come and see actual spacecrafts and walk up to it. You get a nice view of it when there's nobody around. But you could actually come up like this gal's leaning on it. I mean, my friends that work for NASA today are horrified by how everybody could touch the artifacts, look at them, have a great time, and they just leave them out in the rain, leave them out in the sun, no particular worries about it. But this was heavy duty stuff to, think that, just a few weeks or months before, this thing was orbiting the Earth, and now you can come and take a look at it. It was big stuff. Gemini 4 capsule, you could walk up, look down, see how cramped it was for the astronauts to be in there. This piece was a replica. This is the lowest stage. It's called the boat tail stage of the Saturn V rocket. This was kind of fun. There was a button on one of the support pylons that you could basically, it said push to ignite. And when you would walk under it, lights would light up in the booster engines. They start roaring with sound, very loud bass speakers. And I remember one of my younger brothers walking underneath it. I don't think it was me, could have been me. Well, one of the Cotter brothers pushed it and announced that we were all going to be burned alive. And the younger brother went running in panic. But it was a very effective display. And again, you had all sorts of other things. You had the Apollo module, the command module and service module off to the side, the lunar module off to the back, Hall of Science still being built there. Exhibits, static to things about exploring the moon, how it's all going to work, how there was, people had been concerned. Was the moon comprised of 32 feet of moon dust that the lunar lander was going to sink into? So there was a lot of things about the displays and probes they were sending up to test it. This was kind of interesting. The Mercury capsule up here on the left-hand side, everybody thought it was a replica. Sat up there for years. Finally, the rockets wore away after the fair. They took them down to refurbish them. They turned out that was a real live Mercury capsule, the first Mercury capsule ever launched. It was called a boilerplate capsule. Did not have all the instrumentation in it, but it was done for a test of the red rocket that's on top, the escape rocket system. So it was done for a beach abort test, actually launched, set up, recovered, and it's now on display inside the Hall of Science. And the one that's out there now finally is a replica. But it's kind of interesting that NASA and everybody else for 30 years had not realized whatever became of the real Mercury capsule. And it's just been sitting there and become a home for pigeons. And again, as I mentioned, they had all sorts of things, the different probes and everything out there. You had the X-15 rocket plane. Between the seasons, the real rocket plane was updated in real life. So they came and they updated the one at the World's Fair to put the latest modifications on it. Just a great display. Looking back here, you can see the Hall of Science has been finished here. You can see Space Park down below. And then in the center of the picture, you can see kind of a white blob sticking up, sort of a towery looking thing. That is the air ventilation system for the underground home. And we're going to take a quick look at that. The underground home, you need an entrance to get into these things. And the few that they built, they made them look like real suburban homes or maybe a garage. But you would come here, pay your money, because this was a pay-to-see operation at this small building up here. They also had a soup and salad bar out back that they were glad to take your money. But you would go down these steps, past the fountain, very small signage for the underground home. Oh, if this one got out of line, I got a kick. We're all enjoying the space program, excited as it could be. The guy working there, he just looks thrilled, doesn't he? Anyway, we're going down into the underground world home, and they had fake trees down there, fake bushes. It was quite a large exhibit, much bigger than most people think. Why? I managed to get a few things out of line there. This is the kind of example of what you had at the underground world home. You had a patio area out there, and you could actually change those paintings in the background on rollers. And you could decide, I don't want to be living at my home on the New England seashore anymore. I want to push the button and I want to be at Central Park. I want to push the button and see the Grand Tetons. So you had a whole underground house, but it wasn't that you just walked down and there you were in the living room. You could come down, sit on the patio. You had trellises overhead to give you some feeling of not looking at a concrete ceiling. You had all the plastic plants. You could also have live plants down there because, again, you had a lot of light to try to grow things down there. But it was a very involved operation. The concept at the time was, of course, nuclear war was going to devastate us all. If you had an underground world home, you could survive down there and be nice and peaceful and content. You could also, in this particular thing, if you were in an area of bad weather, say you were in a cyclone or hurricane-prone areas, an underground house would be just what you needed as well. So again, I got a couple pictures out of order. We had just seen. I'll just jump back to it real quick. Avis was right next to us. So you had the Avis cars. They were built by Aero Development, same people that built a lot of the stuff for the Disney shows. Great fun that you could take one of these cars, go driving around. This guy's got his hands full as both kids want to go for a ride. again, our little friend with his feather. People just had a great time driving these cars around. We'll get to Chrysler in a few moments in the background with their very big car, but got a kick of people out in their Sunday best. This young lad's out driving around. He's wearing a jacket and tie. And being cars and being New York, we of course have our share of rear end accidents. We have all sorts of things. You can see a yellow car in the background. A lot of these cars got damaged in these collisions. They took them off to the side. I have some of them where they're desperately trying to put them back together with pieces all over the place. This is kind of neat. It's the gang from the Lowenbrow Pavilion came over for a visit to the guys next door at Avis. We will now head over to Lowenbrow to see where they worked. Lowenbrow is a very, very late addition to the fair. Matter of fact, the map that I have over my desk here of the fair does not have Lowenbrow on it, an empty spot. That this was one of the areas that the fair corporation filled at the last moment. You can see one of the Kodak picture spot signs, the yellow square below the Lowenbrow signs. So a lot of pictures show up as a particular Lowenbrow signs because people said if Kodak says I must take a picture, I must take a picture. But this was a super popular area. The gals carrying all their beer. How they could carry 4 of these at a time is beyond me. I did not drink at the fair because I was 12 or 13. But having later worked in Munich, I went to some of the real beer gardens over there, and I'm still in awe that they could do this. It was a very popular spot, as you can see, because they also served very inexpensive meals that were very popular. And again, we think about everything in international cuisine being different today, but to go out here to the fair in '64 and get a cold beer and a bratwurst and some sauerkraut, that was exciting stuff for people that were eating bologna sandwiches for most of their lives. You could also go and pick up some souvenirs. You could get full-size beer steins. They walked there, and she's got one of those in the basket there. You could get these mini ones. You could get all sorts of things with Lowenbrow's logo on it. And again, just another view. People, it was very popular outdoors. It was nice weather. You could just sit out there, relax, get off your feet for a little while. They would take the Lowenbrow beer wagon and parade it around the fairgrounds, mostly through the transportation area. Sometimes for more formal parades, they would go over to the rest of the park, but they would come around here and kind of entice people, follow us back to Lowenbrow. The horses were on display after the fair, by the way. When they sold off the fair, one of the things that was auctioned off were the Lowenbrow horses. So I don't know whatever became of them, their lineage, or where their offspring are today. But you know, certainly that's something you see, a catalog of used air conditioners, used plumbing, one set of used horses. They were sold off. This is in the end of the '64 season. They're holding a big sign, see you in '65, reminding everybody that they'll be back. And if you get horses at the fair, you need to have a guy whose job is to take care of horses at the fair. So the little details of things you don't think about, but somebody had a plan for it. And I'm sure he just enjoyed his job like crazy. Nearby was the U.S. Royal Giant Tire, the giant Ferris wheel that was a giant tire. When it first opened, it was the U.S. Rubber Tire. You could see on the hubcap because the company was just going through a rebranding. And then it later reopened as Uniroyal, the new branding name. This was a joint project of all things between U.S. Royal, Uniroyal, and the Port Authority of New York, who somehow got involved with the fact that this was in the transportation area, and they had managed to make themselves the master planners for the transportation area. So somebody at the Port Authority of New York came up with the idea of a giant Ferris wheel and a giant tire that is a Ferris wheel, and they were able to interest Uniroyal into supporting it. They ended up getting the contract of all things for the exclusive rights for giant tires at the World's Fair, which caused the state of Illinois some problems when they wanted to put a giant tractor tire on display, and they had to get a waiver to put another giant tire. You know, the fact that lawyers would worry that somebody else may have a giant tire at the World's Fair is kind of amazing. But it was a very popular thing. I think it was about $1 to take the ride. After the fair, it ended up going to Atlantic City, New Jersey for a number of years. But again, even at night, well lit up, great advertising. The tire itself is in Detroit, the tire went without the Ferris wheel to Detroit. The Ferris wheel went without the tire to New Jersey. And this is sort of view you'd see when you get up top, looking out through the wire mesh, safety mesh out there, people walking along the Meridian Road. We're going to get over to see some more dinosaurs in a moment. And that's over at Sinclair Dino Land. Sinclair had an exhibit at the 33-34 World's Fair in Chicago of dinosaurs. They came back to do it here at the 64 World's Fair. Super popular. Dinosaurs, for whatever reason, kids just love them. And in 64, it was a kind of dinosaur mania going on. My first visit to the dinosaurs were actually in 1963 when they were being built by the Jonas Studios in upstate New York. I was with the Boy Scouts. We were on a camping trip and it was raining. It was torrential rain. And the poor scoutmasters are trying to figure out what on earth do we do with these kids that are just getting, stir crazy. And somebody mentioned they're building dinosaurs and it's indoors. Do you want to go see it? Well, we did. We drove over to see it, and they had been widening the road to take the dinosaurs back down and take them to the fair. When we were driving back down, my dad's brand new, just several weeks old station wagon, the road collapsed, dropped us into the drainage ditch, so we had water coming in the back and going out to the front of the car. And he had to get the car pulled out by a farmer's tractor and towed back home, and had explained to my mother what had happened to the family's only new car we had ever had. So for all the times at the World's Fair, my father refused to go anywhere near the Sinclair dinosaurs. And for years after, if I ever want to get a rise out of him, I could just mention the Sinclair. And I don't think he ever bought Sinclair gas again after that. This is an overall view of the area. You see the winding path, the dinosaurs. Over in the back there is a bunch of people at a booth on looking at some machines under a booth. We'll get to take a look at those, but those were the Mold-A-Rama machines. And again, the dinosaurs are great. This picture shows up all the time, the T-Rex attacking the tires. And other shots, he's eating the New York State Pavilion in the background. You had the dinosaur out front. He shows up everywhere. Why? Because there was a Kodak picture spot sign right in front of him. Again, boy with his hat, you can go and visit the other dinosaurs. Oh, this one, by the way, the fountain here is empty at this one because it became a common thing for some of the people working at the fair would come over and drop detergent into this particular fountain, and he would end up being in a giant thing of bubbles. The same people would start dropping detergent into the trough at the Small World thing at Pepsi, that sort of thing. Finally, the detergent fountain fiends stopped when word got out that the fair corporation was not only going to make sure you got fired if you got caught, but you were going to get arrested. So happily, people stopped throwing detergent all over the fair. This little guy was stolen, made it in the newspapers that some people actually came into the fairground, were able to break him off and haul him out. The police were able to recover him and get him back. Brontosaurus eggs, again, somebody, you see a small bird there, somebody broke him off, that was not recovered. And here's the Mold-A-Rama machines. These are actually the Henry Ford. These are not at the fair, but for folks that remember them, you would drop your quarter in, make plastic dinosaurs or other figures. The great smell that you would carry them around. Not too many of them survived from the fair because all of us kids would get into battles that I'd have my Brontosaurus, my brother would have his T-Rex, and then we would smash them into each other. And the Brontosaurus necks did not last very long. Just for the folks that did not get to see these things, each of the pavilions had a VIP lounge. This was the one for Sinclair. You could be inside looking out, see the dinosaurs, and be sitting inside and enjoy yourself while the rest of the world was out in the fair. And we're going to get over to something that Frank should be enjoying. We're going to look at the SKF Pavilion. And what I'm going to do here is ask Frank to unmute himself. So Frank, as I go through these, if there's any particular observations you would like to share, please do so. Okay, I think you just muted yourself back. You should be unmuted now.
Okay.
Okay. So SKF, a big maker of ball bearings, kind of a unusual concept for me to have a ball bearing exhibit at the fair. But Frank, how did you come up with this particular design?
Well, basically, it's the smallest site in the whole transportation area, maybe the smallest site in the fair, except for the little kiosks. And so I decided that if they were going to get any attention at all, people would have to know it's there. So I convinced them that we should get this pylon kind of thing above the level of a lot of the pavilions, so people would at least know that it's there. And SKF thought that was a good idea, so we moved on that. And the upside down parasol is actually a flagpole, and the base of it is about six um, uh, plywood molded to the shape of the parasol. They were built by displayers and they were assembled on site. And then the coating was neoprene hypalon, which was, I think, the first commercial use of it. And the mullions were coated with, they were aluminum and they were coated with a veneer, which hadn't been done before. So that was the whole deal. Gets notice, and then we decided to go down into it so we could get a little height below grade too.
Yeah, it's certainly very eye-catching. You know, as you came walking along, it's so much higher than other areas in it. Then this is part of the displays I think that Barry Howard did. Did you work closely with Barry?
Yeah, actually, Barry and I work very closely on a lot of the stuff. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you have any slides coming up, but the big attraction was a robot
Yep.
that was Jim Henson. It was a Muppet.
There you
Uh,
go.
there he is, and I knew about Jim Henson because my family and I lived in Northern Virginia when I was in the service, and he was he had started with these Muppets advertising Wilkinson's coffee that was perfect for the water in the area. So Barry found him and convinced him to do the Muppet.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Somebody asked online if he was going to be in there, and they had a sketch of him. But you know, this was kind of a comedic thing. Again, unfortunately, with still photos, you don't get to see everything, but you can see his legs bend, and he would go up and down, and he'd be articulated. So, very, very early piece of Jim Henson history there. Great. So I think that's it for SKF. When anything when we get back to the end of this, Frank, you'd care to share? Love to hear it.
Okay, great.
Great, thanks. We're going to move on to the Travel and Transportation Pavilion. This was a large multi-vendor facility. In other words, it was not the one company exhibiting. This was the concept: I will go and build a pavilion, I will rent out space to lots of people, and I will make lots of money. They found out that they could build a pavilion, they could rent it out to lots of people, and they lost their shirts. But very large piece of real estate compared to what Frank was mentioning, how small SKF was. The center piece of it was the Moon and Beyond, a Cinerama film. It was done special effects by Doug Trumbull, which brought him into the attention of the fellow that did 2001 Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick. I believe that this film has been lost. People have said they think they may have found a copy, but it's never been shown anywhere since the World's Fair, and nobody has been conclusively able to say that they do have a copy, but it's just one of those rumors. A shame if it was lost. But again, the pavilion had these giant murals on it. You had the moon dome up there off to the side, and you had all sorts of exhibits. The Army brought in this very high visibility helicopter, which had flown to either, I don't remember if it was the South Pole or the North Pole, I think it was South Pole, which it could come and see the latest things that they had Army displays on portable bridges that were used to, you know, combat zones to ford rivers and that. This one was particularly dear to my heart. It's the Polaris missile. It was added, I think, for the 65 season. This is, again, of 65. I did not realize 8 years later I'd be one of the engineers designing the replacement for the Polaris missile. So it's really kind of amazing how your life, you don't think about these things, and a couple of years later, there you are doing it. So again, proof here that Neil Armstrong was not the first man to walk on the moon. Yes, I use that same lousy joke every time I show the same picture. But inside you had exhibits. You had down in the back, you can see the thing about Sea Hunt. Lloyd Bridges had a film there that they did about undersea diving. Lloyd did not participate in all the shows himself. United Airlines had exhibits showing their latest, newest things, jet aircraft, because it was still a big thing for 707s and that at the time. You could get, again, just like Eastern Airlines, make reservations for other United destinations, but you did not have the ability to drop your luggage off. They also had all sorts of displays of antique cars. So you have a Mercer Raceabout here. And for movie buffs, you had the Leslie Special and the Hannibal 8 from the movie The Great Race. Kind of crazy cars. Later end up on display out here at Movie World in California. And absolute fan of the movie, so I was a real thrill to go see those there. Nearby, you also had mobile. You had the mobile economy test run where you could go inside and sit at a simulator and see if you were able to make your gas last as long as possible as you drove in a simulated race around the United States. Frank mentioned they had something to do with Greyhound. They had a very large building here at the fair. Greyhound had the exclusive transportation contract, so they had the buses, the glider rides, the escorters. But they also had this large facility over here at the fair. The building was almost kept, it was so big, it was almost kept as a firehouse after the fair. Lasted for quite a while, and they finally decided it was too expensive to modify it. But it was a big operation where you could come in, learn all about Greyhound's, routes and that. You could also meet Lady Greyhound, get your picture taken with her. Or you could go into this cafeteria that was inside, which had something that was absolutely amazing, which was microwave ovens. And this was one of the first places that you could walk up to and stick your food into a microwave oven and heat it up yourself. I think microwaves may have first been on display or available at the '62 Seattle Fair, but this was the first wholesale implementation that you could go and, nuke your food and, get used to something we take for granted today. Excuse me. Outside, you had the Port Authority heliport still in the park today, no longer a heliport, of course. But if you look at it, the thing is done as giant stylized T's in every side, T for transportation. This, again, was where the helicopters came and gave you tours of the area. I'm sure the people that lived around there were just thrilled to have helicopters landing and going 10 hours a day. You could also take a helicopter from in Manhattan to come out to the fair, so there was a lot of traffic going on. And you get a nice idea of the New York skyline at the time in this particular shot. Down below, you could take a tour of one of the helicopters. This was a non-functioning one. It was their sales model that they took around, but people could see what it's like if you were going to go upstairs and take the helicopter ride. In the '65 season, they replaced it with a Ford tri-motor airplane. Part of American Airlines had an exhibit there. And up at the top of the fair was a restaurant. Now, this was kind of an interesting thing that, boy, I wish I knew now what I knew. I wish I knew then what I know now. If you went into the top of the fair restaurant, you didn't actually have to eat up there. You could walk in, go up to the restaurant, and walk right down another flight of stairs and be in the fair without having paid for it. Somebody told me that, I think the last week of the fair, at which point my parents wouldn't let me go to the fair anyway because it was going to be too crowded. But it turned out it was something that the Fair Corporation never really caught on to, that you could walk into the restaurant for free, not eat, and be at the fair. And I know some people swear they did this many, many times. So up at the top, very nice restaurant. You could go up there and dine, look out at the fair itself. Just an idea of how large this area was. It's now a catering hall used mostly for weddings, proms, things along that line. But it was out of my family's budget. We did not ever eat up there, so I have to live vicariously through photos. Bar up there was a very popular spot, and the family taking a snapshot up here. The bar had this collection, which was touted as the world's largest collection of liquor bottles in the world. It was, I have several pictures of it, quite voluminous. After the fair ended, this was the property of the Port Authority, and this was held in their vaults at the basement of the World Trade Center and was lost when the World Trade Center came down, along with almost every other piece of history of the Port Authority. So this is just kind of a sad loss, but kind of interesting display that somehow the Port Authority had the world's largest collection of liquor bottles. You could also go and take a tour. They had a movie and they had an exhibit of the upcoming World Trade Center. We're going to go back out now, take a look at Chrysler. This was dead in the center. This is the 1965 paint scheme of Chrysler. 64 is very white and kind of white and blue. They came back with a very garish and made sure you could not miss it for 65. But you walked in, it was auto fair. They had a number of these islands, 6 acres, as they mentioned, of imagination that you'd walk in. The centerpiece of the whole thing was the Chrysler Theater. Somebody mentioned when we were getting started about the marionettes. You had Carby Carburetor here. He was the star of the show, come out and tell you all about the wonderful things Chrysler is doing. And he was the brainchild of Bill Baird. He's here with 2 of his other puppets. And he had this whole slew of them. He had mechanics and other things that would come out and chat with you and go through the show. And then here's Carby being operated. Today people get used to the idea of performers on stage showing you how the puppets are done for things like Lion King and other shows. But this was very different for 1964, that the puppeteer was visible out on stage as he's animating the puppet. In the background was one of the new cars coming out of Chrysler, and they would extol the virtues of it. And outside you could see the turbine car in operation. This was a revolutionary design that Chrysler had, the idea that you would run with a turbine as opposed to a piston controlled or a diesel engine. They built this racetrack sort of design where they could show the car going at a pretty good clip around the area. Or you could come out and see the car, see how different the engines looked. You could actually go and look inside the car. They put a fleet of these cars out on the road for people to test them out, see if they worked. It turned out they had a much more maintenance issues than they thought. The car bodies were built by Carmen Ghia, Italian company, and they were brought into the United States without having taxes paid on them as proof of concept vehicles. When they decided they were going to scrap the program, they had to scrap almost all of the cars to avoid paying the taxes on them. So this whole fleet of futuristic cars are crushed. Jay Leno has one. There's one out here at the Peterson Museum in LA. I think the Henry Ford may have one, but I think there's only 4, maybe 6 of these cars still in existence. A very different looking piece of automotive history. You also have the lagoons out here with the cars out there floating seemingly on jets of water. Obviously, they're actually sitting on a steel platform. In the back, you have the giant car. Chrysler had a giant car and a giant engine. You could tell this was a 65 picture because he's got a parking ticket for staying too late under his windshield wiper, which for some reason they thought was funny in 65. But you could walk underneath a giant car and find out how giant cars operated. And every giant car must have giant bucket seats. So these are literally seats made out of giant buckets. And there's the mainspring that you wind your whole car up and keep it going. All this was animated. These things were moving, lots of funny sounds and noise. It was very entertaining. You could come out of the giant car and you could get a picture taken at the giant license plate, which in 1965 had the little red sticker that all of our real cars had added for it. Or you could go over to the giant engine, 1 million horsepower of automotive power. Again, doesn't really show in these pictures, but the fan turned, the air cleaner at the top turned. There was a lot of motion and animation underway in all this. So very, very entertaining. And if you walked into the giant engine, you got to see giant pistons that would be going back and forth, moving up and down. They repainted them in different years to try to make them more visible for what they were. You could also take the ride, the assembly line ride, which is kind of bad. You had Ford had the Dinosaurs and the Mustangs. GM, we'll get to that in the middle. And this ride for Chrysler was you got in a car and they would take you through a simulated assembly line. Not particularly exciting. All sorts of other things. This gazebo area here built out of truck bodies. It's funny, I'll post one of these things online. I did the other day, I posted a picture and people instantly started saying, oh, that's part of a 64 Dodge Dart. Or, it's amazing how the car buffs can look at a truck chassis and tell you what model truck that was and how many miles it got to the gallon. You also have these chairs lining the lagoons. A lot of these have made it into the collector's market. A couple of friends have them out there, but they were very popular to rest your feet and just get off the, the feet for a couple hours or a couple moments and enjoy the fair. Chrysler, who knew they made boats back then, and they were on display. Give you an idea of what they did different between 64 and 65. Here's the rocket, because again, you don't think about it, but Chrysler was making all sorts of stuff for the aerospace and missile industry. So you have the 64 version and the 65 version. The water just blasted out of the bottom of this rocket, very loud. I still remember that very well today. I didn't even realize at the time looking at it that Chrysler made missile parts. It was just something neat to look at as a 13-year-old kid. Oh, this one's a little blurry. I managed to sneak a 3D picture in there. So if anybody has 3D glasses real quick, you can come and look at the Chrysler Zoo, which had all these animals that were made out of car parts all over the zoo. Giant centipedes, metal chomping monsters, little bugs, all sorts of various odds and ends. Again, a whole wide variety of it. And they were presided over by the zookeeper. And this was the one I mentioned the other day, and people instantly started recognizing car parts of it. He was the head of the zoo. You could come down, get your picture taken near him. After the fair, he ended up going to New Jersey for a number of years, sadly lost now. But again, you can see he's got steering wheels for ears and headlights for eyes, and then his head turned around and his arms moved back and forth. So he had a lot going on. You could play this maze game where you were trying to answer questions about Chrysler products, and at the end of it, you could win a turbine car model. Very popular for people that get those, and people still have them and prize them. And again, more parts, people again could tell you everything about it. We're going to jump over to GM as we're getting down near the end. General Motors had the biggest, most successful pavilion at the 1939 World's Fair, seen here, and they also ended up having the most well-attended pavilion at the 64 World's Fair. They went to the exact same plot, just like Ford wanted to be where they had been in 39. Again, you can see the New York City Pavilion, which is now the Queens Museum, just up ahead to it. But this was a huge, huge facility in 39. And they built an equally impressive, huge facility for 64. Sort of a spaceship design. Matter of fact, Doug Drexler, a World's Fair fan and a friend of mine, used this design to create the design for Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco in some of the Star Trek movies. But the massive pavilion, looking down again from a helicopter ride overhead, just absolutely huge. You would enter into the large building down the flat part of it and see Futurama 2, a display of how life is going to be in the future. And then you would go up to the dome area and see the displays of the various cars. And then up above, you see a lot of vehicles parked outside. That was where they had the larger things of trucks, buses, and other GM products. So besides having this big building, they also had quite an extensive outdoor exhibit area. And again, the facade, just a huge structure. We go inside, we're going to be taking the tour in no particular order. Futuristic cities, all of these little cars were on tracks and they all moved. A couple of the cars have survived, and that's all that has survived of the wonderful world of Futurama. It was just destroyed, thrown in dumpsters, hauled away. And like I said, a few people snuck a couple cars in their pockets for kids, but the rest of it's gone. So again, futuristic city, an idea of showing how this was all built. This was just shortly before it opened, part of the futuristic city, painted background, tracks that the cars would all ride on. You had exploration going on at the Antarctic. So there were going to be predicted by this point in time that there were going to be permanent settlements there, mining all the riches that were underneath the ice cap. You had a futuristic weather station, so these people were going to be able to tell you how the world's weather was going to be. Supposedly then deploy satellites to help with rain seeding where there were drought or break up hurricanes. You could sit here. I got a kick out of this in London. It was 68.2 degrees because I guess that was the American inability to realize that it should have been in Celsius. And again, more stuff at the ice cap, exploring there. You also had jungle road builders. This was touted as using a laser beam to cut off trees, drag that and other raw materials into this giant machine. Very intricate model. At the end, it dropped out a 4-lane highway, complete with painted lines on it to get rid of that pesky Amazon jungle, so that people could get to where they were going in the latest GM cars. Again, more futuristic cars, trucks, everything moving around in there. You had a desert community. My friends from Disney that are on the call probably feel shades of Horizons for some of this, but futuristic homes out in the desert, including a spot for your garage to be sitting there in style. Farming out in the desert, everything was going to be done with agriculture being water brought in, mechanical farms, lots of robots growing food for the future. You could also jump under the sea because we were going to have all sorts of undersea hotels and habitats. So they had these intricate little models, people sitting at a cocktail lounge enjoying their drinks, and down below they're getting ready to jump in their little submarines and go off for a tour. Again, for those of us for Horizons fans, this will look very, very familiar. And little scooters that, again, these were on wires. They would race around, the little yellow scooters and other things that go between the sets. Of course, by now we'd have colonies on the moon. You can see this on a track. A very articulated lunar rover would go up and down the hills, another one in the background. Fleets of rockets would be carrying raw materials back to Earth to be used and people up to work on the colony. When you got done looking at the future, you could come down and look at today. You had all sorts of GM products. Again, not everything just cars. You had all sorts of other odds and ends. You could see Frigidaire, big display there of refrigerators, AC spark plugs off to the left. Boy here is looking at some of the international operations that GM has around the world. And again, mentioned AC spark plugs. They were, trying to remind you that besides the cars you drove, these were the things that made the cars you drove work. Futuristic car of what we're going to get. I think this had been originally on display out in Seattle, brought out here. In the background, another display of upcoming Delco products that would be computerized diagnostics. They were predicting the amazing thought that you could plug your car into a computer and the computer would do diagnostics on your car. Who could believe that in '64? Well, today, obviously, try to get a car these days, you don't do that on. Kitchens of the future. And something else was kind of interesting. They were predicting a fleet of satellites orbiting the Earth, beaming data back and forth between, in this particular case, car dealers, but they were, you can see up above all the lines trying to suggest a world of satellites up there, and Elon Musk and everybody is up there putting satellites up all over the place for small cell phone systems and everything else. So in '64, they were getting a lot of this stuff pretty right. They also had concept cars. In some cases, it was just to show how aerodynamic cars of the future are going to be, no details to it. But in others, you had fully fleshed cars. This was a 3-wheel car going to be sold to women. And the reason was the hatchback would open up and all the groceries would be in a grocery cart that would slide in and out of the car, that you would just take your empty cart, slide it out, go to the market, fill it up with groceries, slide it back in and drive yourself home. You had the Firebird 4 concept car for the people that Carlos had a Firebird. I remember this was what they were going to be replacing with next Carlos, the Firebird 4. And again, just all sorts of these cars. They did not have a lot of mechanics in them. They were on a set of mechanics that would tilt the car back and forth so people on either side could look inside to it. But all the futuristic things we were going to get. They also outside had the Bison, a futuristic truck that was going to be running around. I think this was, again, a turbine-powered vehicle. The Tower of Power was an exhibit of showing how GM had the largest trucks and the smallest trucks. And by the way, their trucks are so strong, you could stack other trucks on top of them and they would do just fine. They had exhibits of antique vehicles. The Manhattan and Bronx company here. You could get milk truck, 1915 milk truck on the right, and then the latest GM milk truck over on the left. Heading out towards the back exit, we come across the National Maritime Union Park, a very strange sort of exhibit. Back at this point in time, there was still a bit of an American merchant marine, and they were the union for the merchant marine trying to show that American shipping was a great industry and please support it. It's pretty much gone now. But this small area, excuse me, I'm gonna grab a drink. And look at this, you can't even really tell that signage what it's for. So whoever they paid to design and do that sign didn't do a great idea, but it was a kind of open area. I think I have a small picture. Yeah, this is an overhead view. They had this pond out there, which the thought was to put model ships on. I don't think they ever did. The building in the back had an exhibit of the merchant marine, but for the most part, it was just an area to come and sit and relax. The angular roof up front is an Arlington hat shop, but a very quiet spot. Looking from the National Maritime Union, we're over at the last exhibit, the Hell Drivers. This was a stunt show where people would race around, flip cars, drive on two wheels, jump over things. Here's a guy jumping over a bunch of mechanics on a motorcycle. I hope they got paid extra for that. And again, just cars racing around, doing all sorts of stunts. The people that lived right across the street, I'm sure just had to absolutely love hearing this thing going. Not a super popular show. A lot of the pictures show the audience kind of empty because again, you're going to the World's Fair to see futuristic sort of things. You saw exhibits like this at racetracks or stunt driving shows at various places. We had Freeport, Long Island. We had the raceway out there. They did this sort of stuff every Friday night, so it's not the highest tech sort of thing. And then we work our way back out the far end of the site. We're coming to the Henry Hudson Gate. And unfortunately, we are going to be leaving the World's Fair transportation area. So let me stop the share. And I will take a look real quick here at the comments. If anybody has things they would like to add, say, correct, change, or whatever, feel free to start waving. But let me just look at these real quick. I saw no, I made a mistake on something somebody said. So 1 second. Why? Lots of comments. It's a good thing I wasn't trying to read these during the thing. Okay, let's see. Ford Mustang became the iconic car that Archie drives in the comic books, replacing old Betsy. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, subliminal advertising. I went to the fair, rode around Ford Mustang, and then I ended up driving Ford Mustangs for 24 years or something. And finally, that was the next to my current car. So. Idea for future presentation, films and TV special connected to the fair and the backstories. I can try that. Records, yes. Am I able to go full screen? To me, it was full screen. I'm sorry it wasn't, and I didn't see your comment until now. People, my family had the incredible experience of seeing one of the first Mustangs ever put on the streets, July '64, Michigan. Yeah. Futuristic vehicle. Daddy gave it to me to try out. That must have been really cool. Okay. Entrance to ride suggests curvature and if you had wings. Which ride was that, Greg, that I was showing at that particular time? I don't know where you are to unmute you here. I have to go find you. Wave so I can see you. Oh, there you are. Okay. You should be able to unmute, Greg.
That was just as people were entering the Magic Skyway. There was this sort of hoop thing. It was a circular kind of. It was just a design thing. When you got into the queue, into the ride load of if you had wings and you went into a globe-shaped thing, there was the same kind of tunnel with the hoop shape that resembled that. It just struck me that it was probably it might have been something that just in their heads when they did that.
Yeah, you wonder how subliminally they influence themselves. And somebody mentioned after the fair, they put the engines back in some of the Mustangs. Actually, they put the engines. I think the Mustangs had the engines in them the whole time because they were light. It was the heavier cars like the LTDs and some of the things I had to take them out. But after the fair, they put all the engines and all the transmissions and everything back in all the cars and sold them to employees. And there's a little plaque that comes on a lot of them about, this was a World's Fair vehicle. I like to joke about, you're getting a car that has, how many miles on it, but was sat in by 7 million people. Good luck for the upholstery. There's actually people that go online and try to find out if they have a Ford Magic Skyway car, because again, you had that steel plate underneath it to, grab the wheels that propelled it. and you also had the rack, the pin that was going, steer it around. We have all the serial numbers of the cars that were on the thing, and people do write to us, and we try to find them and let them know they have it or not. You can also look in the trunk of the car and find the mounting brackets for an 8-track player, because as you rode through the Ford Pavilion, you could hit a button. The first button on the radio would get English, the second one say Spanish, the next one German, the next one French, which we got a kick at. I went on Ford, I don't know how many times, so you'd start hitting the button. And if you hit it too hard, the buttons would pop off and then they'd have to replace them. But you can still find the mounting brackets in the cars for the 8-track players. And the wheels, yeah, they had the wheels going at different speeds. The idea to keep them spaced. And Bob Gurr, the guy that did the ride design system, said it took a long time to work it out, because they worked out the fact that all the cars, they would know that an LTD would weigh this amount. And they know that a Mustang would work that amount, and they could control the wheels in that. The one thing they had not taken into account was that you might have an LTD full of very, very, very heavy people and a Mustang full of very light people, and that would change the weight as they came down the hill. So they said that's where they were smashing all the cars into each other, doing all the damage. And he said they ran out and bought every baseball bat that was sold at every sporting goods store in New York, and they'd stationed Disney and Ford employees along the length of the ride. They would run out and throw a baseball bat underneath the front wheel of the car to stop it from smacking the car in front of them, until they were finally able to do more fine tuning and slow some of the crash zones down. So Bob Gurr, he and I did a panel together at a Disney convention at a Disney World. He has some great stories of trying to get all that to work. Also, sitting down in the basement of the Ford Pavilion as it was being built, and a rat running around, trying to run all over the place, and one of the Pinkerton guards taking a shot at it. It's a great thing. The license plates, where they ended up, they actually ended up a large part at the Henry Ford Museum, Carlos. They have them out there, and there's a number of them that they put out. Don mentioned the baseball bats there. Who produced the actual ride control system? That was Disney. Disney did the entire ride system. Dave, that was, I do have a close-up of it, and it has a Disney logo on it for it. Do they have the molds and such to replicate the dinosaurs for the Universe of Energy and Epcot? Yeah, it's actually, they kept a lot of the dinosaur molds and that sort of thing, and some of the ones at Epcot have been redone from the original dino molds, and some of them, like you see the T-Rex today looks a lot better than the T-Rex that they had of the future. The ride system similar to the People Mover. Yes, they later took the wheels. They did not bring the cars back out to California because they didn't want to use that amount of space. They brought the dinosaurs out, but they brought the wheel system, and that's what was used for the People Mover system at Disneyland. Disney World used the linear induction motors, so a different system. Baseball bats, yes. Okay, let's see. Yes, mentioning that the Mustang first came out with a very underpowered 6-cylinder car, and then they put the 8-cylinder. I, of course, had to have the 8-cylinder Mustang. Great fun in between gas spills. Who were used as the models for the cavemen? I don't know. Greg is, yeah, the Geico guys. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if there's probably, if you look at some of the cavemen, it might be the guys that were sitting next to you at your desk at Imagineering. They said the show is narrated by Walt Disney. That was the second season, Glenn. The first year, the season, it was narrated by Henry Ford Jr., and then the second season, they improved it. They made it much more lively and a better narration with Walt, and as you mentioned, it did come from the car speakers. The Lotus is the Henry Ford Museum. Yep, Beth has mentioned there's a CD that has outtakes from the narration as they're trying to get it right. Okay, just scrolling through these real fast. Henry Ford has a lot of stuff that came back from the fair. They brought back a lot of pieces, and they've also over the years bought a lot of pieces of other exhibits, like pieces of the IBM Pavilion, that sort of thing. So the Henry Ford has a great collection. Okay. Convenient merchandise shops out at each location. No, they didn't. They didn't have the Disney design that if you walk out of Small World now, you must walk into a gift shop. If you walk out of, Buzz Lightyear blasters, you must walk into a gift shop. it's actually interesting. If you look at these pavilions, they wanted you to buy a car, and they didn't real Ford wasn't really in the business of selling model Fords or plush Fords or Ford t-shirts or anything. So there was hardly any merchandise associated with any of these pavilions. They gave away the Ford pins over at GM. You got a little badge. I have seen the future, but you know, you think about today, what they would have. You absolutely would walk out of Ford, and it'd be a thing out there selling you dinosaurs. They'd be selling you, you know, wind-up Mustangs, all sorts of stuff like that. Is the 64 World's Fair copyrighted? Very enterprising to create new and reproduced items. Yes and no. When we redid the World's Fair for Iron Man 2, we took off so many of the logos, like the AMF monorail just became the generic monorail, because we didn't want to get into battles with AMF for using their logo, but we could also then sell that logo space to make it, you know, the little Cotter Corp monorail or something. So a lot of the things with the 64th Fair, I can never tell you what the rights are for trademarks, copyrights, patents, that sort of thing. I just know if you want to build your own Unisphere, you can go off and do it, because the Unisphere was copyrighted by U.S. Steel. It was assigned to the Fair Corporation. When the Fair Corporation ended, it was given to the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, and they forgot to renew it. So the Unisphere is no longer copyrighted. So if you want to go and put a Unisphere in your backyard, that's between you and your neighbors. And let's see, just zipping down here. Radioactive diamond, my radioactive and my relative's house explains a lot. That's a good one. Yeah, people back then were not generally inclined to damage things or steal pieces. You know, they didn't get out of the cars to run around and jump and grab a dinosaur's head or do that sort of thing. You know, in later years, of course, you know, the world has changed, and you have to just about put laser beams to shoot them down as they jump out of things to run around. Richard Herring mentioned Space Park was nicely refurbished now, scaled down. Yes, because they let a lot of the rockets rot away past the point of no return. The ones that are there, they did a wonderful job taking them off site, bringing them back and looking up. Another great topic, what can we see and do right now at the fairgrounds? That's when Jim Brown did a couple weeks ago in the pouring rain. And then we are going to see if we can get Jim, when the weather gets nice, to take us back for another tour of the grounds. Okay. Just jumping through some of these quick. The horses went to Meisterbrow in Chicago. It could be Wayne. I thought they went to somebody in Connecticut, but you know, maybe the guy in Connecticut wholesaled them or middleman them or something.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the sequence of events, and I hope I'm not remembering something else, but there were some horses from some public event, and I think it was the fair.
Very well could be. Yeah, somebody's mentioned the dinosaurs. You know, it's interesting that we had the Sinclair dinosaurs, you know, making those Mold-A-Ramas. When we did the Destination D23 thing at Disney World, I said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we got a Mold-A-Rama, and brought it back and made dinosaurs. And that was a trip down Lawyer Lane at Disneyland. It was just astonishing. I mean, you know, we had to go and get all these things that would show the Disney lawyers what the dinosaurs were made of, in case a kid ate one with the plastic, you know, like, you know, kill them or turn them radioactive or make them a mutant or something. So I had to go through all sorts of nonsense to get, you know, I mean, I spent more time, I think, on the getting the Mold-A-Matic in there than I did getting anything else in there. So we finally got the Mold-A-Matic down there, and they realized, oh my goodness, these things turn out X number of dinosaurs per hour, and we have so many people, what are we going to do? Because they're all going to be online to get dinosaurs. So we ended up making a number of them, and then stuck numbers under the chairs that if you were a lucky number and you got a ticket, you could go out and get a free dinosaur and not have to, you know, wait online. Later, a couple of years later, we did a thing. They were doing a display at the big fair that Massachusetts has every year, their annual summer fair. And I was asked to go back and do a World's Fair exhibit for that. And we arranged to bring a Mold-A-Rama machine in for it. And we had the base changed so that it would not say World's Fair, it would say the Big E, the exhibit. And it was really great to walk over, drop the money in, and it was a quarter, put it in there, and you would get out the dinosaur. And I have a bunch of them sitting up on my dresser upstairs. But 2 days into it, the machine broke and a hose broke, and all it would do would be to shoot hot plastic out. And I have a picture. I'll have to find it and show it on another show. The big plastic dome where it's supposed to be making dinosaurs just has plastic everywhere. And people thought this was really funny to keep slamming quarters into it. And I finally had to go and unplug it. And when the guy that owned the machine came back, I said, oh, crap. I think that exhibit was about 6 years ago. He's probably still cleaning it. It was just horrible. I'll have to show that. But the dinosaurs were great fun. And you can still find them at a number of zoos and that sort of thing out here. Just zipping down here, Wilkinson's Coffee mentioned. Okay, Derek G says the camera negatives are in the Cinerama vault for the Moon and Beyond. That's great to hear, Derek, because again, I've heard conflicting stories on it. I would love it if someday that could be shown someplace. We still have a Cinerama Dome out here in California, so if you find any way to make that work, that would be just wonderful. Let's see. Westinghouse oven, yeah. Just reading through these real quick. My goodness, lots of comments today. UK did not charge the Celsius until 1970. Well, what did I know? I thought they were Celsius all along. I can never figure out Celsius. I just know when somebody tells me it's freezing, it's freezing. So, okay, I think I got to about the last of the questions down there. Any comments? Anybody feel free to have anything, just wave and we'll try to unmute you and let you. Okay, Baron, hang on here 1 second.
Okay, yeah, real quick. You went by that 3D photo real quick. As I grabbed my glasses, it was gone. I know, and look, Greg's got his too. So I don't know if you could have if you can get back to it, or if you got the time to get back to that particular photo. I think Ken's also waving too. He wants to look at his 3D glasses. So.
All right, hang on 1 second. Because we have 3D aficionados here, let me go back to this real quick.
Yeah, mine were at the ready, and as soon as I grabbed them, you zipped by it.
Yeah, because it was so blurry. So here, hang on 1 second. So for you 3D fans, let me come back here.
Got his.
Okay, 1 second. Share screen. Okay, so look 3D.
Wow.
If
That's
enough,
terrific. That's really terrific.
Yeah, definitely.
if enough people ever get 3D glasses, I will be glad to do a fair in 3D day because I have a lot of 3D pictures of the fair.
Well, there you go.
I'm one of the rare people who have a 3D television and a 3D DVD player. They don't even make them anymore.
No, but yeah, I have quite a few, a couple hundred 3D pictures of the 64 fair and also a good number from Expo 67. So, and I have a stereo realist. I never took that many at the Disney parks, but yeah, everybody go and get a set of 3D glasses. I have mine sitting here somewhere on the table too. So it's for the folks that don't have it, you just see a blurry thing, but otherwise it's really amazing how they pop out there into existence.
Well, for those of us who grew up on Viewmasters and things like that as well too. So.
All right.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure, no problem. Dave?
There
you go.
So Cinerama, the real original Cinerama had a dome. It had 3 separate cameras and 3 separate projectors that were interlocked. So you'd actually, if you see one of those original films today, they've been combined so that you can be shown with in a conventional dome without 3 separate discrete pieces of film. So the question I have is, in 1965 or 1964, was that shown in the original 3 separate projections camera systems, or was it a more modern one? And
I believe it was a three camera projection system.
I just Googled it quickly. It turns out if you look that up now online, there is somebody who actually has a theater set up and they're screening films someplace in Ohio, I think.
Yeah, he does it in his backyard every summer, and I think this year he could not do it because of COVID. Now, the Cinerama Dome out here in Hollywood still has the three projector system in it. And I've gone and seen when they've done How the West Was Won, they showed it out here in three strip. They also did It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. So periodically they do show the original version. But like you mentioned, if you get the Blu-ray of How the West Was Won, they've now taken out the seam between the three stripes. But I just love going to the Dome for a traditional, Cinerama experience.
So it turns out I'm part of the Motion Picture Academy Technical History Subcommittee, and the Academy has camera number 3 of the original special camera that was used. And it still works. And there was a short film done recently. The ASC, and I'm also a member of that, has camera number 2, I think. So Richard Edlin and I were taking photographs of historic cinema cameras, and that's one we still have to photograph. But I've physically seen it in the storeroom for the Academy Museum that's going to open. So it's pretty exciting to see something like that still produces. The original film is still a very spectacular viewing experience, in my opinion.
Right now, there's Derek G was mentioning that the Cinerama film at the fair was actually a single strip film. Hang on here one second, these things just scrolled off. Derek, if you're ever able to, find out more information on Cinerama, I think people would love to see something on that.
Definitely.
Now, Richard says Mad Mad World was the only original 3 strip films I know of were Cinerama and Windjammers. I know for a fact that How the West Was Won was done with the 3 cameras. I've seen the pictures of them on location. I don't think they just took a wide one and split that out there. So, again, if we can ever do something on Cinerama, that would be great. Yeah, Cinerama screening of The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm. I tell you, I remember going out with the Boy Scouts out in Calmac, Long Island. They had the Cinerama Dome out there, and the Boy Scout troop went out. Carlos is nodding his head, another scout from Long Island. And it was a big thing to go and see The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm. It just is not the same on television as it was in the Cinerama Dome. It was just a wonderful experience. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, just the whole area of widescreen projection is one that I remember the Academy a couple of years, maybe it's been 5 years ago, did a presentation on large projection systems. And so they screened The Sound of Music from an original widescreen 70 millimeter print with 6-track sound in the Academy Theater, which is this very large, Goldwyn Theater is a very large state-of-the-art, probably one of the pristine, maybe the most pristine theater in the world. And so it was, we could invite guests, and I brought my children to see Sound of Music or to see the presentation. And when that opening scene where Julie Andrews, there's a helicopter shot and she's singing, the panel, you see it on TV like this, whereas the original photography was very large, very clear. And there was this high, all of a sudden, certainly she was singing, but there was this like in the audience to see what a real large screen, high definition, dynamic range color sound experience was like. And even with your 4K TV today, it's not the same. It's just not the same. So people would like to think that, your home theater can be as good as that. Maybe someday, but with all of the advances that we've had, not yet, just not yet.
I remember them reading that when they were doing How the West Was Won, they had to make sure all the costumes were hand sewn, because if they did it with a machine, you could see the stitching on the the big screen. You could tell that they were done by machines, not by people. So Yeah, I mean, it's like today, we can't go to the movies today out here in LA because of COVID or anything, but there's very definitely a big difference between watching a thing on, I have an 80-inch TV. That's great. It's wonderful, but it's not the same experience watching in a theater and also enjoying it with the other, audience members.
Yeah, there's certainly, I'm sorry. So there's certainly,
sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that, again, in the 50s, the mid 50s, the concern was that the people were going to watch TV and not go to the theater. So there were several systems that came out to try to take advantage of the fact that film and the theatrical experience was better. Many people don't realize that Oklahoma was photographed in 35 millimeter, and at the same time, they had a 65 millimeter camera. And so they would photograph it both in 65 millimeter film, which was then blown up to project at 70, and 35 millimeter, because there wasn't that many theaters that were equipped to show the larger format. But
Disney actually did that with Lady and the Tramp.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's filmed twice, once for the super wide, screen format, and the other for the more traditional aspect ratio.
So there's much to know about that. There's several online sites. There's a guy that's retired from the academy now, or at least he was an employee, Dan Sherlock, that just knows everything there is to know about widescreen photography. And maybe we could get him to do some kind of a presentation on that.
I would love it. I mean, it's a great technology.
I will call him and see if he's interested.
Bill and Dave, that's Glenn here. Do you guys know David Strohmeyer?
No.
Yes,
he's
the guy.
Yes, David Strohmeyer put together a film. I don't know if he's still around. I haven't seen him for about 20 years.
No, I talked to him a couple years ago.
If you look it up, he did a show called Cinerama Adventure, and he is probably the most knowledgeable person on Cinerama that I know. And so you might want to loop him into any of this discussion. He had us over at his house, and we looked at a whole bunch of history of the whole deal. And he was talking about how there was this one, the actors hated it because they couldn't look at each other. They had to look off this way for the camera to catch them right. And then we all went over to the Cinerama Dome where they had it all set up to show it, and the center projector failed.
Oh.
So we didn't get to see his finished show. But anyway, I'm just mentioning him. I'm surprised you don't know him, Bill. He was with us during the Epcot film productions.
I will send you his contact information, Bill.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
It'd be great if he would be willing to do it. Very nice guy, super knowledgeable. Hearing that projector failed is kind of, there's this motto of those of us that were engineers also had to be salespeople. And that is the success of your demo is inversely proportional to the people who are watching it. So if it's important, that means it's going to fail.
Well, when we opened Innoventions at Disneyland, we were all supposed to go to the press party, but I ended up spending 5 hours walking the ring, manually triggering the shows because they couldn't get it to run right. And the team gave me a pair of tennis shoes the next day and a thank you note. Marty Sklar came over to me and he says, "I know what you're doing. Keep it up." So
yes, technology is wonderful when it works.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure everybody has those stories.
Well, again, I hope people enjoyed the trip back to the transportation area. It was a hugely successful piece of the park. I mean, you had Ford at one side, GM at the other. Mentioned earlier, that the Ford badges glowed. Albert Fisher, who worked at the fair, was kind enough to say that was done on purpose, so that when the people rode through the GM pavilion in the dark, all the Ford badges would glow just to annoy the GM folks. So, what's really nice is that Warner's waving, Brent's waving there. Did you have something?
Yes.
I have 1939 3D World's Fair.
Slides?
Well, here's the viewer. Here are the little rolls of film
Oh my gosh.
that you
Oh,
feed
yeah.
into the viewer. I could try holding it up to the camera, but I don't think it would work.
No.
Amazing.
And same sort of thing. It's not showing too well. 39, what you call it, San Francisco World's Fair. So I got to get the viewer out and watch them. Keep acquiring stuff. Yeah, like I said, 3D. I really got into it and enjoyed it. And if enough people have glasses, be glad to do it. I actually sell CDs online of 3D photos from the fairs, and if you do buy the CDs, they come with a free pair of glasses. So plug. If enough people buy CDs of photos, I can do a 3D presentation on there. So
Yeah.
great fun.
Here's the size of the film. I've tried to think about ways this could be reproduced, but haven't come up with anything yet. However, there might be a way.
Yeah, what I've done on a bunch of them is I have all sorts of scanners for various size negatives and that, and I've made masks and put those on there and been able to scan them away and do it. But the 3D ones are a challenge. They take forever to restore, particularly the color ones, because not only do you have to get an image right, you've got to get two images right, and then so it's twice the amount of dirt to take off, twice the amount of scratches, twice the amount of color. So the 3D stuff, I must have 300-400 things of Disneyland from the 50s and 60s that I've got to get around to cleaning up. It takes forever. So if we ever get back out of COVID for our Hyperion Association, I'd love to just show those at the studio theater, because I don't have to clean them up. The people can just see them with dirt and everything. But when I computerize them, I tend to try to clean them all up.
Yeah, these are black and white, so they haven't faded, and they're still in good shape. They spent decades just sitting in the basement.
Well, it's amazing what's out there, isn't it?
It's kind of a shame the 3D televisions didn't take off. But the technology, when I first saw it, it was perfection, a lot better than I thought. They don't use red and blue glasses. They use electronic glasses, and you electronically pair them to your TV. And the image, you couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah, I liked it, but having to wear the extra stuff or be tethered down with cables, or that some of them, it just had too many drawbacks that people just you invite 6 people over to watch it. Now you've got to go buy 6 sets of those things.
That's what I did. Yeah, there's no cable. It's a radio signal it transmits.
Okay.
Well, the drawback to 3D television was content. Nobody was making content for it. And if you made content for it, it was expensive. So it's a great fad. It was a great technology, but if there's no content out there for you to watch, regardless if you have to put on glasses or not.
Yeah, if they could.
It's very expensive toy for a few pieces of movies that were produced in 3D.
If they could perfect that without the need for glasses, it would have taken off. And by
Yeah.
the way, the sets can convert regular television program to a simulated 3D image, but it wasn't as good as a 3D Blu-ray disc.
Well, I have a number of 3D Blu-rays I can watch here on the computer, at least, I guess, and put my glasses on or do
Got
something
like
with them.
Pirates of the Caribbean in 3D on Blu-ray. It's
Yeah.
quite impressive to watch.
Bill, it looks like you have a consensus on the chat list for a 3D presentation.
I'll have to
So
see
you
what I
better
can do.
put that on your calendar.
I'll put it on the calendar. Since I haven't been able to get a vaccination yet, it looks like I'll be here next week. So
There you go.
You probably won't see a vaccine till next summer, the way they're going.
yeah, it's certainly not been ripping to a CVS near you, that's for sure. So for next week, if people are interested, I was thinking of doing another land of the 64 World's Fair. I thought I would go to the industrial zone, which has a number of other of the popular pavilions. One of my favorites, the Bell System, of course, the GE Carousel of Progress, IBM, that sort of thing. So are folks in the mood for another set of American industrial might display
Sure.
from the 60s?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just
Sounds
think,
great.
if Moses didn't piss off the BIE in Paris, there might not have been an industrial zone or a transportation zone at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, let's see, can I make a recommendation what 3D glasses to order from Amazon? Pretty much any of them. I've been buying them in bulk, you know, when I sell them with the CDs. So I haven't bought any lately, but, you know, I have both, you know, a heavy duty pair that look like real glasses with folding ear, you know, earpiece of that. And then I have boxes of the, you know, cardboard ones that, you know, for some, yeah, Greg Holmes is holding them up there. Greg, where did you get them in bulk, and any recommendations you'd like to make? Hang on, let's see.
Amazon. I just got them from Amazon.
Yeah, and they're pretty cheap, aren't they?
They were, I don't remember how much they were, but it was pretty negligible to get a batch like this. I had a Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D red blue, so had to do it.
Yeah.
I even have my solar eclipse glasses here too.
Well, I'm not going to do a solar eclipse. That's beyond my capabilities.
Does anybody know where you can get a pair of 3D glasses that will fit over real glasses? I've never been able to get a good pair that'll stay on glasses.
Mine are buried here under crap under my desk, but yeah.
I mean the red and blue glasses, yeah.
Yeah.
You just need big ears like mine.
Oh my goodness, you're all in 3D now. Wow, that's really cool.
Truthfully, I got these from the dollar store about 7-8 years ago. And they're, you know, they're plastic frames and a good lens. They're not a film lens like you get in the cardboard ones, but they were selling them at the dollar store. And I thought, well, heck.
Yeah, I think I got these on Amazon. I think these were $4 or $5 on Amazon.
Yeah, they're not that expensive. You can find them online.
I think when I walk the dog today, I'm going to wear these and see what reaction I get.
You'll look like you're from outer space.
Yeah, exactly.
Say, Bill, while we're on the subject of 3D, when we were building California Adventure, I rigged two 35mm Pentax cameras together and synchronized them, and did a whole bunch of documentation photos of building California Adventure in frame 3D. I had to modify a realist viewer to be able to see the full frame rather than the smaller realist. I don't know what to do with them. They're in a notebook down in my living room. Hundreds of them.
Are they,
if anybody's interested in the original.
Are they stills?
Yes.
They're stills.
They're prints, or are they slides?
They're slides.
Slides. Well, if you ever want to digitize and scan, just let me know and we can work something out.
Yeah, I think, you know, let's let COVID get out of the way, but I would like to do something with them because they're probably one of a kind.
Oh, I would say so.
And it's the original opening day stuff, you know, 20 years now.
You know, it's really amazing how you get dated. I was talking, chatting online with a friend of mine, mentioned last week, we talked about the Underground World Home, and CSI New York had done the bit on there. So I was chatting with him about, hey, would you like to do a sequence here and how you recreated the world, Underground World Home? And he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. And he said, oh my God, it was 12 years ago. And you go, 12 years ago, I can just remember when we were discussing it, you know, when we were trying to come up with how to do it, you know, and it's like, where did that 12 years go?
The interocular on that was about 6 inches. So it's a bit hyper stereo, kind of like a lot of the old Viewmasters were.
Mm-hmm.
So you get an exaggerated thing, and they don't really work that well on people because their heads look really deep.
Yeah, big. Yeah.
But they're amazing. What I love to do is give people a viewer and look in there, and a lot of people will go like this because they think they're looking at real, you know. So that tells me that the clues were good enough to make them believe that it was real.
Somebody's just asked me a question here about which eyes did I use. Yeah, it's always confusing. Does the red go to the left or the right? In this particular case, I said it's built into the left in these glasses, so the left is going to be the red one.
Yeah.
So they're usually labeled on the cardboard frames. They label them.
Yeah, I think the first one I got was not labeled, and I managed to go and restore like 200 of them or something. Probably only 50 the wrong way, and I had to fix it.
your image is coming in a little out of focus. Your background is clear, but your face is out of focus. Everybody else is nice and clear, but you're a little fuzzy.
I'm
I
not.
don't guess it doesn't my
Camera's
cataracts.
out of whack, Bill.
I'm not in 3D.
No, it's not my cataracts. You were
Not-
really fuzzy.
Maybe I'm rocking back and forth in my chair.
I
I do
don't
want to
know.
get.
Background's crystal clear.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Dave English. He's nice and clear now.
Well, yes, Joey.
Joey's nice and
It's,
clear.
yeah, in the 1950s, Miriam C. Cooper produced a film called This is Cinerama, and it was produced because he wanted to eventually make a color big screen Cinerama version of King Kong. It never happened.
Mhm.
And the other thing I wanted to tell you was To the Moon and Beyond was narrated by Rod Serling.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on some of these things, anything that charged admission, I probably saw once. You know, so you know, the free things. I mean, again, you know, things like the riding Ford. If you went over there at night, it was usually pretty quiet, and you could ride it and get right back on it. During the day, it was just a killer to get on it over and over. But you know, at night, as everybody started getting home, these things were just great. You just went on them, rode it, ran over to GM. You know, the whole thing was, can you hit how many of the big pavilions in one day? But like, I think I only went up to the.
Now you're clear, but you were fuzzy.
Oh, now I'm clear. Yeah, Carol mentioned I was fuzzy. I changed something on the camera. You know, on some things like the New York State Pavilion, I think I went up to the top of the towers twice because it was a quarter, and who had quarters at the time? So, Carol, you wanted to mention something. Let me unmute you there.
Yeah, look a lot clearer now.
I wanted to ask something. To the Moon and Beyond. What was that film like? What was it? What was it all about? What did it look like? To the Moon and Beyond?
Joey, do you remember any better? Like I said, I think I saw it once, so I'd hate to get it wrong.
It was a travel. I believe it was a travel through the solar system, and it was done by a Canadian company called Graphic Films, which had Doug Trumbull and Con Peterson, and they both later worked on 2001: A Space Odyssey. And Stanley Kubrick came to the fair and was so taken by it. They had used big models, and they had used something that Kubrick would later use in 2001, paper cutouts that actually looked lit the right way, looked very, very, very real. And but basically, it was a trip through the solar system, and narrated by Rod Serling.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully someday Derek can get it out of the vaults and we could see it again. Well, thanks,
I'd love
folks.
to see that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, folks, for joining. I'm glad I see you up there, Kendall. Glad you're able to day off from the library to join us, and always good to see some familiar faces.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you very much, Bill.
Next Saturday, we'll go to the industrial zone, so get used to we will be singing the Carousel of Progress. We will be singing It's a Small World.
No, please don't do that.
Greg, did you have something? Were you just waving goodbye?
Just want to thank you so
I
much.
was just about to sing "It's a Small World."
Oh, no, next week.
Small, small world. It's a small.
Oh, Leslie's got a Small World shirt on. Hey, how about that?
Well, thanks a lot, Bill. This is one of your better presentations. I really liked it.
Oh, so the others sucked, huh?
Yeah. It was fun today. Advise us before the beginning of the presentation next week if you've got 3D pictures for us to get our glasses.
I will probably throw a 3D one in of Small World or something just to make you feel good. So yeah,
Okay,
you know what happened was I was working on this thing last night. I quit at 1:30 in the morning, and then I finished the last of it. I still had to do GM this morning. And I was, here, I'll just grab pictures of the zoo. And I didn't realize I have the 3D image, the left image, and the right image. So one image, I just managed to grab the 3D image, and it was like picture number 188. I never got around to checking them all out, which is how I managed to get two pictures out of sync. and I had no idea the 3D thing was in there. So when I first looked at it, I said, "Oh God, I'm going blind," and then I realized what I had done.
Well, you put a lot of time into this. I can see that.
Yeah, it took about 6 hours, 7 hours yesterday to sort them all out. When you get 25,000 pictures of the fair, finding just the right ones takes some time.
No,
So-
I appreciate all the time you put into this.
Appreciate it.
It's amazing.
Dinosaurs, Googie,
Thank
and
you.
spaceships. Can't beat that. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Can't
thanks
beat
all.
that.
We'll see you all next
Thanks,
week.
Bill.
Have a great week all.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.